Acting President. I rise to speak basically in support of this bill. Taking firewood illegally threatens the habitat of bats, owls, possum species and is a further assault on our besieged ecosystems. Strengthening of environmental laws and compliance with those laws especially is something my party, Sustainable Australia Party, strongly supports. As a member of the Environment and Planning Committee, actually as Deputy Chair in this place, I've been hearing for many months evidence given to the committee's inquiry into ecosystem decline. Our forests are under siege, and a common theme heard from many witnesses is there is a great neglect of compliance by this government and in an inadequate legal framework to protect many aspects of our forest environment. Therefore, I welcome this bill, but much more needs to be done. This bill should be just the start. Under this bill, the Office of the Conservation Regulator, the OCR, is given more power to act against illegal logging and felling of timber. This is indeed important. However, when discussing the powers of the OCR, I wish to draw on the evidence of a number of expert witnesses from the environment sector heard before the Environment and Planning Committee's inquiry into ecosystem decline in Victoria. Many witnesses say the conservation regulator's powers are far too weak and that the office lacks independence. For instance, Richard Hughes of the Wilderness Society told the committee that the regulator is not sufficiently independent of the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, DELP, nor is it adequately resourced. He said the OCR is not adequately addressing breaches of environmental regulation in forestry operations. Dr. Bruce Lindsay, a lawyer with Environmental Justice Australia, described the Office of the Conservation Regulator as not an independent regulator, but as an administrative office within the Environment Department. This is inadequate, he says. Dr. Lindsay said making the OCR a truly independent statutory body needs to be looked at. Steve Meacher of the Friends of Leadbeater's Possums, said the OCR does not seem to have either the will or the capacity to enforce environmental laws. He described it as, quote, a department within a department. Lisa De Palma of Wildlife Victoria also pointed out that DELP, the same department with the task of protecting the wildlife, issues permits to kill wildlife. She said that with the level of wildlife crime her organisation is concerned with, her observation was that the OCR's resources are quite limited. A very concerning piece of evidence before the committee also came from Tom Crook of the East Gippsland Conservation Management Network, an area where much logging takes place. He talked of the downgrading of what was once classified as old-growth forest to regrowth, which will allow for logging of trees as old as 120 years old. This is not acceptable. Many people believe that logging in old-growth forest will be ending, but according to Tom Crook, the amount of old-growth forest has been downgraded. This means that forests that many people now think to have logging banned in them will continue to be logged because they're no longer classed as old growth. So while I support this bill which aims to prevent the illegal harvesting of firewood, it represents going after the low-hanging fruit in the environmental area. The Office of the Conservation Regulator's framework, resourcing and powers need close attention with a view to increasing its resources, its independence and its compliance powers. And the way we view forests needs a serious rethink. As I said during the planning and environmental hearings, valuing everything solely through the lens of gross domestic product is no longer adequate. A standing, untouched forest has no GDP value, but if you destroy it by turning it into wood chips, then under our current warped economic system, then it has value. This is obviously ridiculous. We do not put a value on the right things. Putting an economic value on preserved and even a restored forest ecosystem, or maybe even especially a restored forest ecosystem, would be a good start in that regard. Maybe we need to have a look at some of our free trade agreements and tariff arrangements so we can get a better value for our wood products. Apparently, having very loose trade arrangements mean that we can't get a good price for sawn timber. So more selective harvesting system is uneconomical, and we have to rely on wood chips for profits and forest waste. And we do need to implement wide-ranging reforms in our environment sector while we still have the choice, because clearly there's a sense that the world is watching our environmental performance, or the lack of it, closer than ever before, and that includes our friends and allies. It's up to us to take a much stronger action to protect and restore the environment. This bill's a good start, but only a fraction of what needs to be done. So let's get moving.
Thank you, Ms Taylor.